Good morning and welcome to your midweek Ireland AM.
We have got a busy old show for you this morning, so let's get going.
It is Wednesday the 8th of March. What other day is it, Tommy?
Lots of days.
It's International Women's Day.
Sure is.
Woo! Oh, look at them. They're feeling it in the studio. That's what they are. Later on this hour, we're going to be discussing the pros and the cons of the day. Please get in touch and share your thoughts. Do we really need it? 0896 111 111. It's also like Day of the Pencil or something, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a load of
other days that are on today.
We'll fill you in on them as the show goes on. Coming up at 8:15, we're going to sit down with the youngest party leader in the Dáil, leader of the Social Democrats. Holly Cairns is going to be here to chat to us.
And as the US Senate and European Commission move to ban TikTok on staff phones, we're going to have the latest on the biggest tech story of the moment.
Would you give up TikTok on your phone?
We don't even have it yet, do we?
Well, I do.
Do you have it?
I'm down with the kids. Of course I am. All that plus from the release of Scream 6. The kids love that. To the Irish invasion of the Oscars this weekend. There's loads happening in the movie world. Brian Lloyd is going to be here after 9 for that. Plus, we've got some food, some fashion, and a spot of wine tasting all on the way between now and 10 o'clock.
Delightful. And it's only Wednesday. Deric, where in the world are you this morning?
Yes, I'm wearing it. It's a long way to Tipperary. Guys, it was a cold night last night. -5 up in Castledurg in County Tyrone. A couple of flakes coming down here at the moment in Tip, and it looks like some wintry showers through Munster and into southern Leinster. The best of brightness the further north we go. But we have come down here to Cahir in the Premier County. Cahir Castle just over my shoulder, dating back to the 13th century. We're going to be taking you on a little bit of a tour later on this morning. I believe scenes for the Tudors were filmed back here in 2010. So imagine Jonathan Rhys-Myers was walking around the streets of Cahir about 13 years ago.
There was another huge film filmed there quite recently as well. It's a really cool castle. Oh, good stuff,
There
Deric.
was, Tommy. Excalibur. Well done.
Well done, well done. Here, Deric, tell us, are we going to see snow?
We have a little bit of schnock there, Tommy, across Munster and into southern Leinster, and it's a very cold day out there today. We've actually a couple of flakes coming down here in Tip at the moment.
Okay, good stuff. Catch up with you later on, Deric. Thank you for that.
He's got the sheep hat on. That's when you know it's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold. It's like the tea cosy.
It is.
It is absolutely freezing out there, so do take care on the roads. But now it is time to go over to the Virgin Media News Hub. Here is Anne O'Donnell.
Thanks, Tommy. Good morning. Well, the government has announced plans to hold a referendum on gender equality later this year. The Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, has said it aims to enshrine it in the Constitution and to remove what he calls the outmoded reference to women in the home. The central bank has revised upwards its expectations for the Irish economy this year. In its latest bulletin, it also forecasts that inflation will come in lower than it first believed. Our economics correspondent Paul Colgan reports.
The central bank is beginning to detect some light at the end of the tunnel. It's revising up its forecasts for the Irish economy in 2023 and revising downwards its expectations for inflation and the rising cost of living. In other words, inflation isn't going to be as bad as it first expected, and as a result, it believes the Irish economy will perform better than it expected. It expects that unemployment will remain low and that we'll continue to see a record level of people employed in this country, and that will also have the effect, it believes, of driving up real wages. And that means by the end of this year, Irish households will have clawed back a big part of the money that they lost over the past 18 months. So all things being equal, the central bank says the Irish economy is poised to have a good 2023 and a good 2024 as well.
Well, a number of weather warnings are in effect, with Met Éireann warning of the risk of low temperatures and ice in some areas this morning. Here's more.
Low temperature and ice warnings have been in place overnight and into this morning in many parts of the country, including Connacht and 7 counties. A snow and ice warning is in place in Cork and Kerry, with patchy sleet or snow forecast there until about midday. Met Éireann says the snow and ice in Cork and Kerry brings the risk of hazardous conditions on some roads and footpaths. Another warning comes into effect early tomorrow morning for snow and ice for most counties in the northern half of the country. Forecasters say a spell of rain will move up over the country, turning to sleet and snow, with the risk of accumulations. Marie Mulcahy, Virgin Media News.
That's all your news for now. It's over to Joe for a look at the sport.
Thanks, Anne. Good morning. Chelsea are through to the quarter-final of the Champions League with a win over Borussia Dortmund last night. Graham Potter's side overcame a 1-0 deficit from the first leg to win 2-1 on aggregate.
advantage from the first leg, but it was Chelsea who started the stronger. João Felix almost found an early breakthrough. Substitute Conor Gallagher thought he had a third, but the offside flag came to Dortmund's rescue once more. Be a sport.
Tottenham manager Antonio Conte says his side can still have a successful season if they fight to win silverware. Conte is back in the dugout for tonight's Champions League last 16 second leg against AC Milan after recovering from surgery. Spurs are trailing 1-0 from the first leg in Milan.
Now I'm back. I'm really happy, and we have an important game tomorrow, and a vital game for us because we want to go to the next round, and we'll try to do it. And this season represents a success if we fight, to be competitive, to win something.
There's live Champions League and Europa League football on Virgin Media TV this week, including Bayern Munich versus PSG tonight. Now over to rugby, and James Lowe says Ireland have a target on their back after 3 wins from 3 so far in this year's Six Nations Championship. Andy Farrell's side continue their quest for a Grand Slam against Scotland at Murrayfield on Sunday.
So far, so good is the message from the Ireland camp, with a perfect Six Nations record so far and familiar faces returning from injury. It's no wonder Andy Farrell is smiling. But while the Grand Slam charge looks ready to fire, James Lowe says it's too early to talk about that.
You never can get too far ahead of yourself. You can't think that because you've won these first 3 games you deserve it, or you don't need to put in as much work, because I guess the higher up the mountain you go, the harder it gets, isn't it? So we've put ourselves in a good position, and now it's about executing these next 2 games to make sure we come home with a trophy. Kieran
Frawley and Nick Timoney have been added to Andy Farrell's 37-man squad ahead of the clash with Scotland on Sunday. Johnny Sexton and Gary Ringrose are included after sitting out the win over Italy. Lowe says Ireland's performances have made them the team to beat. Now they need to up the levels for the next 2 matches.
I fully understand we've got a target on our back, and I think we deserve it. And come Scotland, we need to be on our A game, because they're playing some exceptional footy at the moment. And then 6 days later, we've got England, Paddy's weekend. So it doesn't get much tougher than that. And we're really looking forward to it.
A win over Scotland on Sunday will give Ireland a Grand Slam St Patrick's weekend to look forward to. Anne-Marie Keegan, Virgin Media Sport.
And there's live Six Nations action this weekend on Virgin Media 1. England versus France is part of a double header on Saturday that kicks off with Italy versus Wales from 1:30. And that's your sport for now. We'll have more for you at 7:30. Here's Deric with your weather.
For car insurance, van insurance or home insurance, call the Quote Devil. Unless, of course, you've got money to burn.
Thank you, Joe, and a very good morning to you at home. We are coming to you live here from Cahir down in Tipperary. That is Cahir Castle just over my shoulder, and we have got a tour coming your way later on this morning, so do hang with us for that. Anyway, let's take an opening look at weather together now with Oisin Moran with us on cameras once again this Wednesday, and we're kicking off with 2 warnings. In fact, that status yellow snow warning in place for counties Cork and into Kerry. Some wintry falls expected through the southwest now over the coming hours. That remains in place until 12 o'clock. And then we have that status yellow ice and low temperature warning in place for all of Connacht through Cavan Monaghan into Donegal, also for parts of Longford Louth into Meath and County Westmeath. That's in situ until 10 a.m. this morning. Plenty of black ice, especially on back and by roads, with that band of showers now stripping right across the southern part of the country, so do take extra care. Now right across today, that easterly airflow in the driving seat will be moderate to fresh at times, especially through the southwest. And once again, we are looking at those wintry showers, mainly sleet, possibility of snow once again, tipping mainly across higher ground, but as I mentioned, could tip down to lower levels for a time as well. So pretty tricky driving conditions on the roads. Once again, we're going to struggle in terms of temperatures. A pretty cold day out there today with highs of about 3 to 6 degrees. So cross into tonight, then it'll kick off dry and clear for a time, but once again more wintry showers working their way. It really is the southern half of the country bearing the brunt of any snow showers, any sleet showers through southern Leinster as well. Black ice expected on the roads too, but not as cold as what we had last night, but still sub-zero values, back to about freezing to -2. So that's how it's shaping up here. As a little bit of snow comes down in Cairns Tip, we'll be back again live at 7:35.
For first-time drivers, young drivers, returning drivers, if you've had an open claim or have had too many penalty points.
It's time now to take a look at today's papers. We'll start with the Irish Times. Its headline: AG warned evidence was needed to extend eviction ban. Ministers were warned that extending the temporary eviction ban could be regarded as a serious breach of trust by landlords and that such a move could prompt an exodus from the market.
The Examiner leads with that too. Eviction ban memo warned of landlord breach of trust.
Eviction ban overturned to halt flight of cuckoo fund investors. That's the front page of the Irish Independent. Cabinet ministers were warned that extending the eviction ban would lead to reluctance amongst small-scale and international investors in the Irish rental market.
The Daily Mail goes with Cabinet attack on Housing Minister. Housing Minister Darragh O'Brien was rounded on by Cabinet colleagues yesterday when they learnt that new tenant protections to offset the end of the eviction ban will not be ready when it lapses at the end of the month.
The Star's front page reads: man on pensioner murder charge. A 62-year-old has been accused of the murder of pensioner John Brogan at his home in Castlebar on Sunday.
The Sun's main headline: it's a knockout. Cops drag a teacher and family from the courts. Chaotic scenes erupted inside the Court of Appeal yesterday as teacher Enoch Burke and 5 members of his family were forcibly removed by the Gardaí after he lost his appeal.
The Mirror follows suit. It's Burking mad. Transgender row teacher and family thrown out of appeal court.
And finally, the Herald reads: Burke's drag show. Teacher Enoch Burke and his family members were dragged from court yesterday amid chaotic scenes.
Sorry, that elicited a bit of a laugh over there. Do you know what? After the break, we're going to take you through the stories you're waking up to this morning. We'll talk to you shortly on Ireland AM. Welcome back to Ireland AM. The government has confirmed a referendum on gender equality. It's going to be held later on this year.
So here with more on that and everything else making the headlines this morning is Sinead O'Carroll, editor of The Journal. Great to have you with us. Good morning. Sinead, great to see you again this morning. So let's talk to us about this. This referendum is going to be referendum held in November.
Yeah, so we don't have wording yet. When referendums are called, they kind of give us advance notice and then say, we'll come back to you with the wording.
Yeah. And we love a referendum in this country.
Yeah, we do. And this one has been slated for years and years. There's been talk about the articles in the Constitution that refer to women and family and care for a long, long time. It's been kind of pushed out and out. A Citizens' Assembly then discussed what exactly we should do with this article. So
this is De Valera and McQuaid's line, a woman's place is in the home.
Yeah, so I'm actually just going to read the full line because I think we always talk about the women's place in the home and people don't exactly know what it says. So it says, in particular, the state recognises that by her life within the home, woman gives to the state a support without which the common good cannot be achieved. So for years, people have said that should be deleted because it basically places the woman in the home. The counter-argument to that is, well, actually, isn't it good to recognise the work that women, in the main, do at home? So that has been the kind of debate that has gone on over the years. And the Citizens' Assembly looked at that and said, OK, well, it shouldn't be as it is because that's outdated and stereotypes
but
a
also
woman.
It doesn't really
and it doesn't
mean anything.
And
like,
it doesn't
protected
over the years. I don't think women felt particularly protected in the role that they were doing at home. So the idea now, the recommendation from the Citizens' Assembly was to replace it.
What change will it make? Is it just a case of you want it changed and that's just it? You know, like to have a big referendum, like surely something small like that could be changed quickly, you know? It needs
it has to have a referendum. And then there's the other two.
Why does it have to take 2 years for it to happen?
Well, I think because the wording for this will actually be very important. So a couple of other things, a couple of other articles that will come in is the one that reflects the family. So in the Constitution, the marital family is what is talked about rather than families of all constitutions as we know now. So that's the other recommendation from the Citizens' Assembly. So that will become part of the referendum too. And also the place of care in society. So what people have argued about the place of the woman in the home article is that actually it should talk about people who provide care and make sure that there's constitutional protections for people who provide care. So this is important for when people actually think and feel that the state isn't doing its job protecting their rights within the family or within the care that they provide. So it allows, if it's in the Constitution, it allows people to take those cases at the extreme end, and at the kind of more nebulous end, people will feel protected by the state and by the Constitution.
Because we're not exactly like America, where they're going to their Constitution every 5 minutes talking about their rights and their amendments. But the fact is that it is an enshrined legal document whereby people can. So it is. What do you make of it? Another referendum on getting rid of, you know, about gender equality, women's place in their own. 0896 111 111, because it does lead us on to the next story, essentially, where the Burkes, they love looking at constitutional law and exactly what things say and words matter and semantics. So what's going on with Enoch Burke now?
Yeah, so obviously people have been aware that Enoch Burke has been in and out of the High Court with there's been a couple of kind of cases happening in tandem with each other. The one that we heard yesterday was he had gone to the Court of Appeal. There had been injunctions made against him that he was not to be at the school where he taught, where he had been asked to leave. Because of a row that had happened. He had publicly harassed the then school principal at a event. He was asked to leave. He then said that he was being asked to leave because he did not agree with calling a transitioning student by their preferred pronouns. So
even though he didn't really have anything to do with that,
he was not a teacher of that student. So this all obviously has snowballed.
So he's saying he has his beliefs.
Yeah.
He's entitled to his own beliefs as well.
He tried to make this court case not about actually being asked to leave the school, but about his transgender beliefs. But in the Court of Appeal, they agreed with the High Court yesterday. Justice George Birmingham said that he believes that this case was not about transgender rights. And he actually made a really important point and a really good point. He said, I'm going to use the term transgender rights and not transgenderism or transgender ideology, as Enoch Burke has used throughout this case, because he thinks that's derogatory. So he said, I think there's a derogatory terminology that he is using. So in his judgment, he used transgender rights while dismissing the idea that it was about transgender rights. So it was a very interesting and thoughtful judgment from George Birmingham.
Again, they put on a show. They get loads of headlines, and I don't want to be sitting here talking about them.
Yeah, and the other point is there are always huge delays in our courts at the moment, because we're very short of judges. So there is a lot of new judges coming on stream this year and next year, but there is delays. If you want to take a case about your rights in the Constitution not being enshrined, it often does take a long time. But because there was various things in this that needed to be sorted out quickly, lists were jumped, and then obviously these kind of delays, these kind of interruptions in court. There was probably people yesterday who were due to be heard, and their cases were kicked back because of these kinds of delays. So the judges were actually really annoyed. You can see that.
That they can't get on with what they need to be getting on with.
Also the fact that his fines are up to 28,000. Now, he's been charged €700 daily. It's up to 28,000.
Yeah,
like,
so
where does it go?
The other thing, like this is a bit of a circus, but there is also really interesting legal precedent here. So if you're found in contempt of court, you are the punishment for that, for want of a better word, is to go to prison. So we saw Enoch Burke go to prison. Yeah. And then that becomes kind of unsustainable. You can't keep someone in prison indefinitely who hasn't actually committed a crime. Yes, they are in contempt of court, but they haven't committed a crime. Yes. This has happened before, and the precedent before was eventually the contempt is purged and people leave, even if it's after 2 or 3 months. Enoch Burke was not going to purge his contempt. No. That was very obvious. He is obviously still going to the school. So the judges are in a bit of a quandary then. What do we do? Wilson's Hospital, the school said, OK, let's, put something forward and let's see if contempt of court will take his assets. So the judge said €700 a day, and hopefully that fine will eventually mean that he'll purge his contempt. That has not happened. So legally, it's really interesting. So for some editors, that's where the point of interest in the story is, and it's not just the circus.
Has he been paid it? Has he paid the fine? Do we know?
We don't know that.
We don't know yet. OK, so... No.
But he will be due. The fine is due to be paid.
And if that fine wasn't to be paid, could that mean he might have to go to prison again? Is that...
Again, that would be another contempt of court. So the contempt of court could keep running.
A benefactor could pay that for him, though.
And it does have, contempt of court does have to have some deterrent on it, because court orders have to mean something. Yeah. Okay, So one of the things that he wasn't able to win, one of the injunctions that he may have won, one of his... cases that he may have won if he had come with clean hands. You have to come to court with clean hands if you want the High Court to judge in your favour. Yeah. But he didn't, because he was in contempt of court at the time.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, I don't feel like it's going to go away anytime soon, that story.
No, because he's getting what he wants.
Yeah.
The whole family are getting what they want. Anyway, that's what's happening there.
Let's move on to the HSE. So the HSE, obviously ventilators, mid-COVID, there was huge panic. Just get whatever medical equipment you could at the time, but the HSE have spent 30 million in surplus.
Yeah, so this is one of the things we're obviously going to be learning a lot about as we get into and closer to a public inquiry. We're going to learn a lot about the mistakes that were made, and this is obviously one that the CNAG, the auditor of government accounts, has picked out already, because we ordered 10 times more ventilators than we could ever have used. And it's actually, so I have this boring theory about Ireland that most of our problems are procurement problems, that we just are not good at buying stuff. And when we buy stuff, we don't figure out what we need, what we actually need.
You know,
that's what I'm saying. Irish people as well. We're like, I've got 4 of them, I'll get another one.
You know, Sinead, Ryan and Charlie Weston would be with you guys being like, shop around. I think we're all just bad at it.
Yes.
You know, even things like the eviction ban, we don't know how many eviction notices are actually coming due. That seems like something obvious we should find out before making a policy decision. So it feels obvious the HSE should have said, right, how many ventilators can we actually plug in? How many can we actually use at any one time, given how many nurses and doctors we have? They didn't do that. Now, obviously,
especially when we were being told, don't overbuy toilet roll, you'll be fine. And they're going, buy all the ventilators from other countries.
You can understand the panic mid-COVID as well. They were competing with other countries, and the prices.
And this was March 2020. So it was right at the very start when streets were dead, everything was very scary. We were looking at Italy. So that is a massive mitigating factor. But
by ordering
they ordered 10 times more. We could use 359 and they ordered 3,500. Now, they have got refunds. So one of the things missing in the headlines, they have got refunds. And they are looking for more refunds.
And can they sell them on? Can you go on Done Deal and be like, does anyone want a ventilator?
Well...
Or maybe just buy the beds to go with the ventilators so we get our healthcare.
Can you imagine doing it that way?
I would wonder if... so the IDA helped the HSE find these ventilators in the first place. So I'd imagine there are probably enough ventilators across the world. But yeah.
I don't want a ventilator, I'm telling you. People buy anything on Done Deal. That's what we do.
Listen, get in touch with us on that 0896 111 111. We'd love to hear on any of those stories. It's really interesting this morning. Sinead O'Carroll from the Journal, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you with us.
Great to have you back. We're also going to be talking about the younger generation lacking basic skills. And we have to get to that, because I think it's mean to pick on the younger generation.
Really?
And still to come,
can you
change
a tyre?
I can.
There you go. Well done.
Coming up, we're going to be debating if we really need international... I'm assuming you can.
They're going to make you change a tyre.
They're going to make me change a tyre.
Tomorrow on Ireland AM.
Coming up next, we're also going to be talking about TikTok, the ban on TikTok in Europe and the States. See you very shortly.
We're going to be changing a tyre.
The US, Canada and some EU institutions are removing TikTok from government and staff devices over security fears.
Yeah, it's not just because people are losing hours at work looking at TikTok. Here to explain what's happening is Elaine Burke, host of the For Tech's Sake podcast. Elaine, thank you so much for having us here. Listen, it's not about us all losing time. TikTok, it's run by a Chinese company. Security fears. They're like, do they think that China's spying on everyone through their devices, government devices?
Short answer, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is we're into a Cold War era level of paranoia when it comes to China at the moment. There's a lot of geopolitical factors at play here, and it's less a story about TikTok than it is about China. And it's because TikTok happens to be tied to China because ByteDance, the parent company, is based in China. The Chinese government has a 1% stake in the ByteDance entity that is based in China. And they're just paranoid about the influence that China may hold over people through the TikTok app, or also be able to access data that the app accesses. Now, none of this is founded on evidence. It does just seem to be a level of paranoia, but they are in a landscape that's geopolitically very sensitive. There's a lot of bad blood between the West and China at the moment. There's a lot of paranoia about China's relationship with Russia at the moment in the shadow of a war in Ukraine. So this is really about a geopolitical sensitivity more so than I think anything to do with data protection.
Okay, because I was reading, you can understand, there's a huge war, or not war, but there's this competition between China and the US. And I was even reading the FBI, we're talking about the Chinese counterintelligence and espionage, the greatest long-term threat to the US economic viability. So, they're panicking big time, and they think that potentially if ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, is able to steal or take any... Because, listen, all these tech companies are monitoring every click, everything that we do. So it's nothing new. Like, Facebook and Instagram are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, there definitely is shades of this is only OK when we do it.
Yeah.
Because as an app, TikTok doesn't seem to do any more than other social media apps do. Now, one report that's referenced a lot claimed that it's overly aggressive in how it asks for permissions to do things, and that just means that it repeatedly asks for access to, say, your contacts list to build your friend groups and things like that. But these patterns are visible across many apps and many services, not just TikTok.
It seems to be... TikTok, though, the algorithms on it seem to be way beyond other apps. So is it for knowing what people like?
You can balance that off and say, like, the reason why its algorithm is so good is because it uses its data very, very well. And now what TikTok has done, to its credit, to try and appease these fears, it's actually in negotiations in the US with something called Project Texas, which is essentially about setting up a version of TikTok, setting up servers that are overseen by an American company called Oracle, a huge tech giant and long-term veterans of tech in the States, that will be able to oversee its algorithms, oversee its app updates. And all of this stuff is being orchestrated through a deal that's now being called into contention because this surge of paranoia is coming back, and it's been referred to as like the spy balloon on your phone.
Right.
Because it is a bit, as you said, Reds under the beds in the 1950s and 60s. Like, it's all focusing on it now because TikTok has been going since 2016, happily do its thing. It's got a big hub here in Ireland, employing an awful lot of people. So focusing in on this, it does distract attention and blames TikTok for all of this. But do they believe, like, so they don't want it on government devices, but you can have it on your own private phone, right? Is that what they're saying?
If you're a government employee, it's currently, if you're an employee of the EU Parliament or a member of the EU Parliament, they don't want you to have it on your personal phone if you have access to work-related apps on that phone. So if you have a cross-contamination of work apps and social apps, then they actually want you to separate those two. So you can have a personal device that has no access to your work stuff, and then that can have TikTok on it. So they're not about trying to ban TikTok outright. This is about an oversensitivity to do with people who are in high levels of government. And it could be that their cybersecurity team has found that there's a nominal risk, a low-grade risk, but they don't want to even take a low-grade risk when it comes to Chinese access to their data. Now, China doesn't have to use TikTok to try and infiltrate these things. Like spying and espionage through digital technologies is rampant. It's not just China that does it. Like Five Eyes is an organisation that comprises the US, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And this kind of digital espionage is quite well known. And these countries that are now banning TikTok are actually involved in it as well. And China can also buy data from data brokers that operate out of the US and other countries internationally.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Sure, anyone's data can be sold.
So, like I said, this isn't about data protection and protecting people from surveillance. This is about governments protecting themselves from possible surveillance in an era of increased paranoia between these governments.
Probably a bit of posturing as well from these governments and America. But like even worse, it's not just in America. Like we know even the cabinet ministers here in Ireland have been told they're not allowed to take phones and tablets into cabinet meetings because they're worried about leaks coming out of there. So that you don't know.
From our government, whose whole job is to leak.
Absolutely. Well, listen, they don't need to worry about the phones.
They don't need to worry about
But even with your own Alexa and everything else in the house, there is always that fear. When I was talking about air fryers the other day with my wife, all of a sudden every ad comes my phone about air fryers. They're definitely listening.
I would say that there's loads of evidence to say they're not listening, that it's to do with like other things about your digital footprint.
So
like you may have spoken about it to your wife, maybe your wife looked it up, and the fact that your digital footprints interlink might have been notified by these apps. There's so far been no evidence to find that any apps, TikTok or Facebook or any of them, are listening or using video or audio technology without anyone's permission. Maybe look at your permissions. If you are yourself paranoid and you want to keep using these apps, give them practice what's called data minimization. The apps don't practice data minimization, but you can as a user. You can go into your settings, you can control what it has access to, and just give it access to things that you need to function well in the app.
Oh, that'll take 10 seconds. I don't
where
want
is
to
my
do
phone?
that.
Will you show me how to do that?
I can, yeah.
For tech's sake, thank you so much for joining us. You can find that, of course, on the podcast.
Thanks, Shane. I'll give my
This
phone
is my
a second.
tinfoil hat thing. I agree with you. And also, I know what I can get him for Christmas. An air. Can you wait until Christmas for an air? You got one already, for God's sake. Now, today marks International Women's Day. And up next, we ask if it's a day to celebrate or is it outdated? We'll talk to you shortly.
You're very welcome back. Now, International Women's Day has been celebrated for over 100 years.
Every single year he is out there. It's his favourite day. Forget St. Patrick's Day.
This is a big day. It's a good day. Well, I think. It's ignited revolutions and lots of things. But does it still have a place in modern day society?
Here to discuss our political journalist, Aoife Moore, and columnist and communication expert, Terry Prone. Ladies, thank you both so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you. We can trace the roots back to the early 1900s, 1908, and then in 1975, International Women's Day started really kicking off. You know, there was real big events. So, Aoife, for you, I know that you've done events for International Women's Day. Do you think it makes a difference and it's very important?
For a good while there, I was selected as the token woman for a lot of it. I've done stuff every year in Leinster House. Yeah, I think, you know, we've all done the panels and a lot of it, everyone would agree, I think a lot of it is lip service. You know, we all go and we sit on the panels and we eat the free buns and we talk about, you know, all the challenges that women face. But I still think it has importance and there is a reason to do it. You know, even in this country, we know the rates of domestic violence, you know, 1 in 6 women in Ireland suffer domestic violence. We don't have enough refuge places. We don't have enough women in the Dáil. We don't have enough women in boardrooms. So for those reasons, I think it's well worth to have International Women's Day for nothing else other than if we can embarrass politicians and big companies on International Women's Day when they have these lip service panels. They say, well, you're not doing enough. So I saw yesterday that there is a bot on Twitter, and if a company tweets about International Women's Day, they will retweet that company's gender pay gap. There was a high street bank in England who tweeted, you know, Happy International Women's Day, and their gender pay gap was 40%.
Okay.
Whoa.
So I think if we can use International Women's Day to embarrass the big companies and embarrass the political parties and say it's all well and good, but what are you actually doing for women? Then it's worthwhile. But I totally agree. For me, it reminds me a bit of Pride now. You know, Pride used to be this...
Yeah, and now with corporations are all on board.
Corporations are in it, and it's all about, like, I'm not one to turn down a free cake, but I do think there's more to Women's Day than giving women free buns and telling them to go back to work.
But I think the Pride is good. Is like these things, it just becomes more relevant. Everybody's talking about it and it's something to be celebrated as well. And International Women's Day.
Yeah, it's to be celebrated, but I do think the meaning, and that's why I compared it to Pride, is like the meaning has been lost when big corporations and stuff get involved in it, and it's no odd saying, have an International Women's Day, we love women, if your gender pay gap is 40%.
Yeah, of course. Something like that.
Terry, you wrote an interesting article about this, so because you've been on panels and talked about this before, but you're questioning really the relevance of it.
I am. I said in the Irish Examiner that I thought it was time for us to examine the whole International Women's Day thing. We all feel great, and I make a lot of money out of it because I make speeches, I go on panels, like he's great. But does it actually achieve anything? And I would link it to a thing I see in a lot of women's organisations at the moment, which is what I call eventitis. They have events. They have maybe 6 events throughout the year, and everybody networks and raises awareness. And tell you something, if my business development manager in my company came to me and said, we're having 6 events and it'll raise awareness and create networks, I'd say, and how will I measure that at the end of the year? And I think there's a strong case for women's organisations and women and International Women's Day to be re-examined and to look at outcomes, if any. And in some cases, I'm not sure there's going to be an outcome.
But surely, I suppose, as you were saying, it's better to have something than nothing.
No, can I disagree with you? Okay. As I was coming in here this morning, I was listening to a radio programme, and one of the presenters said to a female guest, well, for International Women's Day, I'll see you later at the champagne brunch. And I thought, Jesus, is that where we've ended up? Is that where... Now, we have major achievements. I mean, let's be clear. The year before 1975, I was fired by RTE for being a woman. Couldn't happen now. Great.
Why?
But didn't... Sorry?
Why?
I was a woman.
Yeah.
I still am a woman.
No. Why? Why were you fired?
Why were you fired?
The new head, I won't name him, Lord rest him and the devil meant him. The new head of Features and Current Affairs arrived in, hero, former Labour Party man, yes, and fired 6 women because, quote, Aoife, you would appreciate this. I cannot send a woman down the Falls Road.
Oh, was that actually...
There was plenty of
That
women
was
down
what
the
was
Falls
said.
Road, let me tell
I
you.
was just about to say. Because we're not long away from, like, I know, neighbours who were guards and they had to leave as soon as they had a kid, as soon as they were pregnant. Bye-bye, see you go. So we have moved on. Like, definitely the world has moved on. But as you mentioned, we're talking about really serious things these days. And it is about domestic violence in the home.
Which last year was the worst ever.
The worst. And something that we heard the other day was, but that's down to people finally reporting it. It's like someone, as though that was a good thing. And it's like, it's not a good thing. We need to tackle it. So, and then the gender pay gap, like in this country, we all know, like you look around and you're getting paid less than the lads. And so, highlighting that.
I would say, I agree.
We have to say it at some stage, right?
I agree.
I don't think it should just be on one day, like Valentine's Day.
I agree with Terry in the way that this notion of raising awareness. We don't need to raise awareness of domestic violence. The people who don't care about domestic violence don't care about domestic violence. People know the statistics. We know it's getting worse because people are reporting it more. So I don't think the notion of having International Women's Day, because we need to raise awareness of women's issues. Women have been screaming about women's issues for decades. So I think International Women's Day, and it can be naff and it can be champagne brunches, and I think that's ridiculous in itself. But also it should be a day to celebrate how far we've come. And also, it was started as a socialist trade union movement. And now we're at the stage where, women couldn't divorce their husbands in this country when I was born. So I think that is definitely something that we should be celebrating. And so I totally get this notion of raising awareness is completely naff. I think that as well. But as you say, do we do nothing?
I read an article, Brianna Parkins this morning actually used to be in here as well, and she wrote a good article about it. And in these champagne brunches, it's very much entitlement. And I was talking to my wife with International Women's Day last night, and she's a nurse. I mean, she doesn't care about it because she has to go and do her job. She gets paid nothing to be a nurse, pretty much. So, and Brianna was talking about this. It's the carers. They don't get paid the right amount of money for the work that they do. So, really, shouldn't stuff like that be changed under International Women's Day?
The thing is that International Women's Day is middle class, middle-aged, and white. Now, all of the things that you're talking about, Tommy, and Aoife, they have to be addressed. But bundling them all together in one day, if you look at it even from the PR point of view, and I run a PR company, I wouldn't like to be trying to get really good publicity out of something on International Women's Day. If I wanted to change the world, I'd be changing it on some other day.
With something like that, and just to say, because we know we're going to get it, there is an International Men's Day. It happens in November, OK? You're all right. We are going to have a day for you.
We're going to celebrate that. Those champagne brunches are going to be epic.
We're just going to be like, how much more are you getting paid than me? Well done, lads. I'm delighted.
If there's anything men need, it's another day.
I do believe it. And also to let you know, if you want to, it's also Be Nasty Day, National Registered Dietitian Nutritionist Day, National Peanut Cluster Day, and National Proofreading Day. So if you want to celebrate something else, pick whatever you want.
Aoife, we're great to have you with us, and Terry Pro, and as always, great to have you with us.
Delightful.
Really interesting.
Let's do this more. I love this.
0896 111 111. We'd love to get your opinion on it as well. Now, coming up in the next hour, new Social Democrats leader Holly Cairns is going to be here on her plans for the party's future.
Plus, we're going to have some food in the kitchen, and Deric gets a tour of one of Ireland's largest castles. And it was snowing where he was just a few minutes ago. We'll see you shortly. Genuinely snowing. Hello, welcome back to Ireland AM. Still to come, we are talking politics, predicting the Oscar winners, and it's only Wednesday. We're going to be drinking wine.
Brilliant. Just what we need this morning. Now, the youngest party leader in the Dáil, the Social Democrats, Holly Cairns, is going to join us very shortly. She's coming in at 8:15.
So why we're cheersing her? Is that a congratulations?
Cheers!
We're going to be predicting the big winners at the Oscars with our movie man, Brian Lloyd, at 9:20. Now, he lost 20 quid to Alan last year. Alan got him on the Oscar prediction, so he's still fuming over that.
He doesn't like losing. Absolutely not. Plus, the producers are treating us to a spot of wine tasting later on in the show. Look forward to that.
Sinead Delahunty is in the kitchen with a delicious fruity cake. Is that what we're doing, Sinead?
Absolutely. We're doing a blood orange and rhubarb cake. So nice and seasonal. Rhubarb is banging season at the minute. So yeah, nice little one.
Yeah, rhubarb, it's one of those things.
Orange yummet.
Your mum trying to sneak it in so that you'd have a bit of veg.
Look at
veg?
that.
Yeah,
Fine. What a great shot of a lovely rhubarb there. Cucumber. Anyway, Deric is in Cahir Castle in Tipperary this morning. Deric, tell us more.
It's rhubarb.
Rhubarb it is, yeah.
Come here, the snow is coming down here in Tipperary. We've actually landed inside the grounds of Cahir Castle. And Lorraine, I suppose loads of Hollywood stars have been here, haven't they?
They certainly have, Deric. We've had from the likes of Helen Mirren to Matt Damon over the years. It's been amazing.
Great excitement here. So I suppose, guys, you could say that Cahir is the LA of Ireland. Back to you in studio, more at 8:45.
There you have it.
The stylists running around the place
bit of snow
there.
come down as well. Love it.
Everyone has plastic surgery and all that. Oh, yeah, it's all about that in Cahir. Now,
There you have it.
we were talking about...
International Women's Day.
We were indeed. Sarah says, I agree that there's no harm in celebrating International Women's Day so long as it's not just a token. The issues that are brought to light on this day, such as pay gaps, domestic abuse, should be discussed and worked on all year round. They should, and they should be talked about all year round. So maybe why do we bother with the day?
Yeah, well, that's it. Brendan says you can't win anymore. When we have International Women's Day, people moan. And if we didn't have it, people would moan. There is no pleasing anyone. I mean, listen...
Bridget's Day. I love a bit of Bridget's Day.
Listen, for the sake that it is, like, to have a conversation with Aoife Moore and Terry Prone there, even about it, like, it's interesting for people. And, like, yes, the champagne brunches and all are, like, are they a waste of time? Is it a bit of... like middle class that Terry was talking about, just celebrating, where actually there's bigger questions to be raised. But listen, it's not better than nothing at all.
If it does make people at work kind of go, right, are we doing the same job? How much are like, let's talk about the gender pay gap. Because that's something that it might start a conversation where companies don't want us talking about how much we're making. So is that they're like, well, you know, we need them competing, we can have people on different... And people, you should be talking about money. Talk about it. Do that today.
And what
Ask your male and female.
Aoife said there about the Twitter actually putting up the gender pay gaps and all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
It's
really
good.
We were also talking about the younger generation. So, the Gen Zers, is it? The 18 to 25-year-olds. So, just 1 in 3 are able to do basic DIY. Now, to be fair, I'm not great at the old DIY either, but...
What is basic DIY?
So, here you have it, right. Changing tyre, car maintenance.
Okay.
Could you, like...
You can do that.
Could you fit a battery into your car with that count?
Absolutely not. Can you do that?
No.
He's just going. I thought he was just going to list out things that. So I can do.
Well, you probably do. Could you jump start a car?
I have done. It
There
has
you
been
go.
a very long time.
Could you jump start a
We're
car?
getting this from our producer. Can you fill the windscreen wiper fluid? Is that what it is? Or the oil? Can you do the oil?
Come on, of course you dip.
Can you
the
dip
oil.
the oil?
Of course you can.
Yeah.
Map reading. Who reads maps anymore?
You don't need to. You don't need that
So
skill
1 in
anymore.
3 18 to 25-year-olds, they reckon, can't do this. And when asked at what age they thought developing these new skills become difficult, Gen Z respondents said the age of 35. So we're both past that. While respondents aged over 58 put the figure at 63 years of age.
So I'm just wondering, for the basic things at home, you really try to grow stuff out your back garden.
Well, I did try just over lockdown. Didn't really work out
I know,
very
but
well.
you'd like to do it. You're interested. So stuff
I
like
think
that.
now that I'm a parent and you have kids, you do this sort of stuff. Like when we just get a bit older. When I was younger, I had no interest in doing it.
Yeah, so it is. You can understand why young people are like, sorry, I'm going out. I don't care about wiring a plug.
Absolutely.
Can
But
you
let
wire
us
a
know,
plug?
your children, like, do you try and teach them how to do things? Do you try and teach your kids how to change a tyre? How to put up a shelf at home, doing basic DIY? Or do you just kind of go, they're too busy on TikTok? They'll learn how to do it on TikTok.
The Chinese will teach them on TikTok how to do it. So basic skills, things that you can and can't do. And if there's something you're sitting there going, raise your hand if you've like employed someone to do something. You're like, I probably should have been able to do that myself.
One time, me and a couple of rugby lads were coming home from a camp and we had a flat tyre and couldn't get the bolts removed for love nor money. And we were trying everything and the spanner wouldn't fit on it. Called one of the dads and he says, have you taken the hubcap off? So, there you have it now.
Do we know the other rugby players? Do we know who they are?
Don't need to be mentioned this morning.
There we go.
Okay.
I'll get the names and text
Coming
you.
up after the break, the new Social Democrats leader, Holly Cairns, is going to be joining us for a chat.
Text us about what you can and can't do. 096 111 111. Talk to you shortly. That's amazing.
Our next guest is the newly appointed leader of the Social Democrats, despite having entered politics only 5 years ago.
Here to chat about her political career and plans for the party is Cork Southwest TD. Holly Cairns, good morning, Holly. How are you?
Good morning, I'm great.
It's great to finally have you in here because you've been going around chatting and it's been a meteoric, we have to use the word meteoric rise for you. So we're here to chat to you and chat about like 5 years ago, you weren't involved in politics, 5-6 years ago. And now you're the leader of the Social Democrats. So did you have a party political background? Were you really into it in college?
Absolutely not. Had no interest in politics. I finished school in 2008, so it was kind of crash time. And I think I actually thought that the word like political party was nearly a dirty word. I was fairly disillusioned with Irish politics, and like lots of my friends, I emigrated. And the only time I remember kind of feeling engaged in politics was around like a presidential election and thinking, oh, like Michael D or David Norris would be great for bringing in marriage equality. You know, that was kind of like just fleeting. And then I was living and working abroad in Malta, actually, working in disability support services. And the marriage equality referendum was coming around here. And I knew I wanted to move home and take on my family farm and business. So I went back a bit earlier to vote. And then I was working away, and it wasn't until the repeal referendum came around that I got really engaged in that. And for me, even though everyone else knows this, it was kind of a light bulb moment in terms of, OK, knocking on doors, asking for votes, that's actually how you affect change. You know, we have this democratic process. And I knew from knocking on those doors in my own constituency in Cork Southwest that people wanted a progressive alternative. And we've always seen our governments kind of being dragged along by the people for progressive change instead of having a government who might actually try and lead a change like that. And I just thought, you know, people would always say, particularly around rural areas, oh, people in rural areas are just conservative by default. And from knocking on the doors, for one, I knew that wasn't true. And for two, I find it kind of insulting that just because we're from a rural area, you know, that we might not understand facts or something like that. Yep. So I just knew that there was space there for something different. I felt unrepresented. And me and two women who I met canvassing, I'd never known them before in West Cork, we formed a branch of the Social Democrats. And it all happened very quickly there. You said 5 years ago. It was 4 years ago I first got onto Cork County Council. And yeah, I always tell people that's during my first ever election in 2019 for the locals. I was told I had to hope, obviously, laughed at.
Yeah.
But my first election, I lost by 1 vote. I called a recount and I won by 1 vote. So just for any of your viewers, don't ever doubt the importance of your vote. If there wasn't for that 1 vote, I wouldn't have gotten the council seat, and I probably wouldn't have gone on 7 months later to get the double seat.
Like it's a fantastic story, and even like the fact that you talk about emigrating because it was the crash and you had to leave, you couldn't get a job. Like it just ticks so many boxes with so many people. You talk about rural Ireland missing out and so many not taken serious, and you can see why since you've been voted in head of the party, how the support has doubled in such a short period of time. Do you think that that's the sort of like generation you're trying to go at? You're trying to get young people involved in politics? The fact that, you know, your agriculture background, you didn't really see that as a future, but so many young people do have to start really thinking, like, how are we going to get change? Particularly when you see what happened in the coalition over the last few days with the rent situation.
That's it. And I think for a party like ours to grow more, and that's what we really need to do in order to have an impact on the next government. You know, we want to go into government, but we need that critical mass to have influence on it. So I do want to reach people who, like me, maybe don't feel like politics feels them or hears them or represents them. And I want to ask them to reconsider. And consider, could be anything from, you know, knocking on doors, just becoming a member, asking somebody else to vote, encouraging somebody to register, to being a candidate, to being a campaign manager. I hope I'll be well placed to reach those people because I was that person only 4 years ago looking at politicians on things like this and being like, excuse me, I don't feel represented. But I also think that those issues around housing and disability services and all of the things that I feel strongly about, yes, I think that there's, you know, people my age with generation housing crisis, you know, I hope I can reach them. But also, like, my parents' age, my grandparents' age, don't want to see another generation immigrating and seeing, you know, their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren growing up in New Zealand or Australia or somewhere else. So I think that the issues that are facing my generation are having a profound impact on everybody.
Do you think, because what's your leader's question, like, do you think the current government, they're letting down that young generation?
Absolutely.
Every generation. I don't think it's just a young generation. I think
Yeah.
there's people who are now 50 years old and they can't buy a house. They don't know where they're going to go in 20 years' time.
Exactly. Maybe looking at a notice to quit and, you know, with the ban. And, like, I think that the thing that we've all felt for so long is that there isn't a real, meaningful effort to address the biggest issue facing us as a country at the moment, which is the housing crisis. Yeah. And this week, I think a lot, the frustration and the disillusionment is real. But it's also just a wake-up call. Like, they're not even pretending anymore. They're not even...
What do you mean
pretending? Well, lifting an eviction ban in the middle of a housing crisis when we know there's about 3,000 homes who will be evicted now. There's 12,000 people who are homeless. And 3,000 homes, we don't know how many people that is. So they're talking about all of the, you know, the potential consequences of this, the unforeseen, the unknown, unintended. But they're prioritising that over the intended, known consequence of forcing people, thousands of people, into homelessness and saying themselves, yeah, like, that will happen and that's going to be difficult to defend.
Their argument is, though, that if we don't do this, then we extend it for 6 months, then we have to go to the Constitution. We're making people homeless in winter. We're coming into summer months and we don't want to lose the landlords. That's their argument.
That's their argument. But look, the lobbying from landlords has clearly worked and I think that's plain to see. But also, in terms of it being unconstitutional, they can't constantly be leaning on supposed advice from the AG when, crucially, if they said, well, in a particular mitigating circumstance, perhaps it could be revisited, that would make it constitutional, perhaps. Yeah. Why haven't they explored that?
I mean, listen, it's really interesting and there's so many other parties and people obviously agree with this. Yeah. Now, obviously, with the opposition, it's easy to be able to push those questions. Yep. But for you, with Social Democrats, as you say, you have to grow. So if you want to make change, you're going to have to go into coalition with another party. Would you look to the likes of Sinn Féin? Would you look to one of the other parties to go into coalition with, if it meant you got into power and to make change?
I would talk to all parties about going into government. Like I said, we really want to go into government. I didn't go into politics to go into opposition, although I've realised the importance of opposition in it. It's so important to have people there holding government to account. Crucially, we want to implement our policies. In Ireland, we always look over to countries like Sweden and Denmark and go, oh, in Sweden and Denmark, there's no reason we can't be counted among those countries in terms of having a socially democratic government. That is the aim. Would you fit
alongside the likes of Fine Gael, though, Social Democrats of Fine Gael, like...
This is it. So
you see what's happened to the Green Party every single time that they go into a partnership with the big boys. It does feel like their policies. We had Nessa Horgan sitting here from the Green Party, railing against her coalition partners and her own party, and it feels like she's like, these are not Green Party principles. So do you worry about your principles having to be washed away?
That's the key, isn't it? So you need that critical mass. We need more TDs so we have a profound impact on a government. But yes, and I think one of the things that I found confusing before I went into politics is the actual spectrum of political parties in Ireland. And yes, for us, Fine Gael would be at the opposite end of a spectrum of left and right in terms of how compatible our policies would be, and it is difficult to see how we could form a government with them as a result of that. But we would talk to every party and drive a hard bargain. But for some of your viewers, just to explain that, like, the principles of our party is that it is necessary for the state to intervene where there's market failure. So things like health and housing, we believe, shouldn't be left to the private market because private businesses don't have a social contract with you or with anyone at home. They are there to make money. The state has a responsibility to the people. And Fine Gael's position is that they privatise things and leave things up to the private market and it's make your own way. So the floor beneath which people can fall below in terms of poverty is so low. You can be homeless, you can be unable to access healthcare.
Yeah. We've seen in the papers today the cuckoo funds who are like, well, we're going to leave if we can't do it. But
how important is it to have females in government at the minute? I think it's only 27% of female members are in the Dáil at the minute. But if you look at the 6 main parties, 3 of their leaders are females. Do you think it needs to change? It is International Women's Day after all. Do you think for the government to go forward, you need to have a more female voice in there?
Yeah, I think the key's in the word public representative. And so we're all public representatives. We represent the people in our constituencies. And then you see, 50% of the population don't seem to be very well represented. So, for example, in all of Cork City and County, the biggest county in the country, there's 18 TDs and I'm not sure how many senators. 1 woman. I'm the only woman representing all of Cork.
Why is that?
I think, there's loads of structural barriers that we could talk about in terms of, like, maternity leave for county and city councillors was only introduced this year. There's still no provision for TDs. There's structural barriers, but crucially, the honest truth is what it comes down to is after every election you see 30-something seats for Fianna Fáil, 30-something seats for Fine Gael, this for the other parties. And those parties are returning the public reps basically every year. Yep. And they find it very hard to engage women in their politics. And we've seen this. I remember seeing 100,000 spent on Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael trying to encourage women's politics, but it's not working.
But is there an element here? Because I do know that in the Dáil, for an awful lot of the male sitting TDs, their female partners, I mean their wives, do a huge amount of work, right? That's just a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes if you're into the politics. The amount of work they do is unbelievable, unpaid work like they are now. When you're a woman putting yourself forward, an awful lot of these people are politically engaged. The people who are going around knocking on doors, a lot of them are women. Yeah. It's putting yourself out there because you felt it, that you're just going to be attacked. And let's be honest, sometimes you just want to take a back seat, you want to be engaged, but you don't want to be the figurehead where you're going to be getting rape threats from people who don't like the fact that you're a woman who has a mouth and is actually letting words come out of it.
100%. And look, I remember being at a UCC politics event and there was all of the elected women in Cork there, so councillors mainly because there's only one TD, but every single woman except one had to be asked. So I do want to say to people who are at home, reconsider. If you think it's not for you, think again. And because those threats, and yes, women get a particular type of abuse in politics, the only way that we can help to address that is by getting more women into politics. And we need it for better decision making, because I think we'd have the same thing if there just so happened to be way more women than men in the profession.
But it has to
we'd probably have an unbalanced policy.
It has to affect you, Holly. Like, it has to get to you, the sort of abuse. Like, I've seen it. I've gone online. I've seen what's said to you. That sometimes you might be like, I'm just done. Like, we've seen Jacinda Ardern, we've seen Nicola Sturgeon go, I'm out of here, lads. And a lot of it had to do with abuse. Like, do you think something has to be done going, right, we're finding those accounts?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of those faceless, nameless, emailless accounts, which is the vast majority of the ones who troll women online, there absolutely needs to be something done in relation to that. And there's contradicting views in terms of the need for anonymity, for whistleblowing, but there are other ways we can address that without allowing this kind of nonsense to go on online. It's like the Wild West out there. But I do think that the answer to it is to get more women in. That is the key. We do need, there's so few of us in it at the moment that you could even more targeted abuse.
Yeah. Well, listen,
we can spread it out amongst us all.
What you're doing is certainly getting a lot more people interested in politics, and continued success to you as well, leader of the Social Democrats, Holly Cairns.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming in and talking to us this morning. You're very welcome back. Now we're feeling fruity in the kitchen this morning. Sinead Delahunty from Delicious Food is making blood orange and rhubarb cake. Good morning to you, Sinead.
How are you doing?
So rhubarb is in trend. It's pretty much it's all right in season.
In season, and it's not a cucumber.
Yeah,
and it's a vegetable.
That was a bit of a mess up earlier. Yeah, listen, it's very early in the morning and I need a bit of food, so it's just
perfect timing. So we're essentially making a rhubarb and blood orange cake. So it's kind of like a sponge base. So I've just creamed together some sugar and butter here with some orange zest. So again, really important to use as much of the orange as you can. I'm going to add in some eggs now.
So sorry, the zest you put into it. Okay,
yeah,
right,
exactly.
That's the real flavour, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to use the orange juice and also the orange flesh as well. So just bringing your eggs into it.
And would this be quite a common cake? Do you mean to have like rhubarb and blood orange? I hadn't heard of it before.
Common flavours having rhubarb and orange together, to be fair, because they work really well. They just balance each other out really well.
Okay.
And again, as I said, it's seasonal. We have rhubarb in season, and likewise blood oranges you don't get all year round.
They're both quite soury though, are they?
They work together. Listen, there's sugar in here as well,
perfect.
So it all balances out.
That's what we need.
Adding in a little bit of ginger as well, which is really, really nice, just to bring through another little flavour.
Okay, right, great.
And then instead of typical flour, I'm using a mix of ground almonds and polenta. Okay. So this is really good if you wanted to do like a gluten-free bake, if you have someone at home, or likewise if you're bringing something like into work, and you're not too sure, and there's, different kind of things. Really easy one to do.
So if you didn't want to use that, you could just use normal flour,
You could use regular flour as well, yeah. So I'm using baking powder as well, obviously, to get our rise.
That's ground almonds.
Almonds.
And you just buy that?
Yep, exactly. You could blitz them up if you wanted, like from whole almonds, but just the ground are perfect, a little less work. And then I have polenta then as well. So really nice one. The ground almonds add that kind of nuttiness to it all. So it is really lovely, and still quite moist, so it's not dry.
Oh, there is really good flavour on.
Yeah, you get the ginger.
You get the orange in it, loads.
That's the zest. It just really adds to it. I'm going to add in some orange juice now in a minute as well, so you get that kind of double whack of flavour. But it just all binds together. Again, just take it easy with your folding. Don't want to overfold it.
So here, you were just travelling as well. You're just back.
Yeah,
where were you?
I took January off from my other job, being a physio.
Yeah.
And coming up to visit you. And so I went travelling in Central America. So it was amazing. So adding in the orange juice there. And then I'm going to fold in the rhubarb as well.
Okay.
So this rhubarb at the minute, it's quite young.
Yeah.
If your rhubarb is really thick and green, that's okay too. Just chop it up a little bit smaller.
Okay.
So you just want to get nice, easy chunks into it. Yeah, so travelling is amazing. You know, you get to experience lots of different food, most importantly for me, and cultures and just different ways of life. So
where did you go?
Incredible. So I travelled all the way around Guatemala as much as I could. And then I was in Costa Rica as well, in one of the blue zones.
Wow.
On the Nicoya Peninsula. And then I was in Belize as well. So kind of your Caribbean style
I thought you would have been
island.
doing Caribbean type food then first. This way you've been taking all your inspiration from that.
So I suppose a big thing for me is still keeping it very seasonal and local.
Okay, yeah, of course.
So I love to eat, you know, the produce that these countries, you know, produce so well out there.
Okay.
But when I'm back in Ireland, then I like to stick, you know, to, you know, like...
Stick to your rhubarb.
Stick to
and your
like
blood
what we
orange.
have. I know
blood
we don't grow
orange,
oranges, but it's seasonal.
Okay.
So literally just smooth your cake down like this. Goes into your oven then, 200 for 10 minutes and then 180 for 20 minutes. So just reduce down your temperature.
Okay. Lovely.
And
away
then
you go.
it comes out like so. So, you know, whereas yours looks really pretty now with the
rhubarb
topping.
on top,
yeah. So just really simple topping. This could be used for like a carrot cake, a sponge, really anything. Just cream cheese, some yogurt. I'm not going to use all this. So just about 2 tablespoons. That's
just natural yogurt.
Natural yogurt, Greek yogurt, whatever you have, and then just a little drizzle of honey. So just adding in that sweetness. Typically, cream cheese frosting would use quite a lot of icing sugar. So just keeping it a little bit nice, still keeping the sweetness, you know, balancing out the tang of the cream cheese, but not overdosing with the sugar. So just a really nice, easy one. Just beat it together like that. And then just all you have to do is spread it on top.
Okay.
And then if you have rhubarb, you know, roasted, or the blood orange slices like I have
How
here.
did you do this? How did you do it, the slices?
Yeah, so they were, as you can see, the orange slice that I have here, they are quite thick. So I just put them then onto a baking tray and a bit of parchment into the oven, so really low, and then overnight. So I have a warming oven. If you had like a range, like an Aga or something like that, you could place into the bottom oven overnight. Or likewise, if you were doing like a slow roast maybe in the oven on a low temperature, so less than 100 degrees, you could leave it in there and they'll dehydrate.
Look at that. No, honestly, really tasty. I love the blood orange and rhubarb as well. Really, really good.
Great.
And just fry those on top.
Just pop on top like that.
Sinead Delahunty, absolutely nailed it. Gorgeous.
Thanks a million.
Alan's going to be raging. He's missed it. Now, coming up after the break, we step back in time as Deric visits the historic Cahir Castle in County Tipperary. See you very shortly.
Oh, hello there. Welcome back. It's time to check in. I think we'll check in with Deric, will we?
Why not?
He's wearing his lovely furry hat with the sheep on it. He's in Cahir Castle. Over to you, Deric.
Oh, yes, guys. It's not a furry hat, guys. It's a woolly hat. A little taste of Sneachta coming down here in Cairns, Tipperary. Lorraine Egan from the OPW is with us now. Before we get into all the glitz and the glam and the red carpets of Hollywood, let's talk about the history of the castle here first, Lorraine.
Yes, Deric, this place is steeped in history. Cahir Castle is one of Ireland's largest and best preserved medieval castles. It was built on a natural rocky island in the middle of the River Suir, and it's an amazing castle to visit. You can see turrets, towers, high walls, battlements, arrow loops. It's a great
got
place.
it all, and this place was home to the Butler family, wasn't it?
Home to the Butler family for about 600 years. This large tower here was where they lived. And yeah, an incredible spot.
The name Cahir itself.
The name Cahir is Cahir Dún Iscig, and the Dún tells us a story of an old stone fort that was built on this island long before the castle, first recorded in the 3rd century. And it was first recorded at that time. Nothing remains of the stone fort today, but any of the stones within it were reused into the castle when it was being built.
During its history as well, and this place goes back a long, long time, from the 13th century, it fell twice.
It did fall twice, yes, Deric. Once in 1650 to Cromwell. He wrote them a lovely letter and asked them to nicely leave the castle, and they did. Yes,
and we've beautiful shots of the internal as well. This place is so well preserved and so well looked after, isn't it?
This is a very intact castle, Deric.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, we're going to move on now to the present time, to the glitz and the glam of Hollywood. We're going back to 1981 and Excalibur.
Yes, the movie, John Boorman's Excalibur, of course, was filmed here. An amazing production. You had the starring Liam Neeson, Helen Mirren, Patrick Stewart.
And there was great buzz around the town
brilliant
at the time,
and of course
wasn't there?
loads of local actors as well were starred in the movie.
2010 then we had The Tudors.
We had The Tudors starring Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. So again, more excitement here at Cahir Castle.
And you didn't get to meet him because you were with Baba at the time.
Unfortunately.
So you were a busy lady. Now, moving to the present day then, of course, 2020, what did we have?
In 2020 then we had The Green Knight, a David Lowery production, and it was amazing. We had Dev Patel,
the star Slumdog Millionaire.
This
yes.
is it. Alicia Vikander, and of course
our very own
Barry Keoghan.
Barry Keoghan, and big excitement for Barry this weekend because he's up for an Oscar for The Banshees of Inisherin.
Yes, fantastic news.
Have anybody gossed at him?
No, I couldn't be disclosing any of that, Deric.
But they did stay in the town, did they?
Yeah, I'm told, so I'm told.
Yeah, OK, we won't give anything away.
No.
But fingers crossed for an Oscar this weekend. Now, we're going to head back in time once again because we have a story about a cannonball that is placed right up there at the top of the tower.
Yeah, this is a souvenir that was left to us by the Earl of Essex, the second Earl of Essex, Robert Devereux. In 1599, Queen Elizabeth of England sent the largest army ever to come to Ireland to crush a rebellion that was happening in Tyrone by Hugh O'Neill. And when he arrived in Dublin, unfortunately, he decided to disobey the Queen and send more than 2,000 soldiers down south here to Cahir. He took over Cahir Castle within 3 days. The walls were breached because they had heavy artillery with them. They had cannon with them. And you can see the lovely souvenir they've left us today.
And he left that, and of course, he got the chop
Exactly. Unfortunately, yes, he was imprisoned in the Tower of London for 2 years and later beheaded on Tower Green.
And I know you have an exhibition running up as well at the top of the tower.
We have a brilliant exhibition that it gives a great account of such a huge event in the castle's history.
Oh, so there you have it, guys. This place absolutely steeped in history and heritage. It's a £5 to get in, right?
That's it.
A £5, £4 for OAPs. It's wheelchair accessible, free to kids. So what more could you want? It's the perfect day out. And guys, who knows who we'll see around the corner? We could see another Hollywood star. HeritageIreland.ie is where you'll find them online. But for now, for all the gang here in Cairns TD, back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much, Deric. You could bump into
Thanks,
two
Deric.
Johnnies. I was down there in Cahir last year, I think it was, and bumped into Johnny B. Yeah, there you go.
Johnny B and just Johnny B, not Johnny Smacks, not together. You didn't get the bingo of the Johnnies,
no. I didn't get the two of them.
Couldn't get the two at the same time.
Well, it was like because Matt Damon and all, they're all going to be there filming as well. Yeah, cool castle, it really is.
Very
nice part of the world.
Nice. Lovely. There's lots more on the way after 9. We've got movie reviews, spring occasion style, plus wine tasting.
Oh, look forward to that. See you very shortly. Hello there. Happy International Women's Day.
Oh my God, thank you so much. Happy International Women's Day to you too.
Are you enjoying it?
Happy Big Nasty Day, isn't it that? And happy Proofreading Day.
Proofreading Day. We are talking about this because we were having a discussion earlier on about
Is it relevant?
Is it relevant or not?
Anymore.
Kate has said, International Women's Day reminds others that gender issues still exist, especially in a male-dominated workplace. I recently missed out on job promotions at work because I was pregnant and then on maternity leave. Wasn't even given the opportunity to apply for these roles. Events today may be naff, but they keep awareness of gender issues faced in the many workspaces every day.
Yeah, amen. Absolutely, that is an excellent reason as to why they're there. Susan, when attending business events for women, I asked other women what the benefits are, and their answer was the speakers will be interesting, and sure, it's a day out. Feels like we're swimming against the tide.
And that's what Terry Progan kind of said. That she was talking, and someone said, "Yeah, but it's a champagne brunch we're going for." And she's like, "Is that what it's about, really?" Erin said, "Sure, I'd miss the champagne brunches, but I prefer if International Women's Day was more of an action day. If it were clear that literal actions we can take as individuals and organisations to protect women's rights and further women's causes, International Women's Day would be far less like a day when we just post pretty pictures on Instagram."
Yeah, just remember that 1 in 6 women in this country will experience domestic violence. So if there's anything to come out of that day, we can remember things like that. And
but
an
is
awful lot of
one
women
day going to make a big difference to
No,
that?
it's not, but we can at least say it. There's something that you'll remind today, and you can probably look towards your male colleague today at work and go, well, he's making more money than me for doing the exact same thing.
Is he now?
I'm not looking at you. Not looking at him. I'm not looking at him, because we're very good. We're very good, as far as I know.
You're making a point here, are you, Maureen O'Connell?
No, I'm not making a point. Absolutely not in this job, my love. Not in this job. We're moving on to... we were talking about Gen Zers not being able to do DIY, according to a new study. Linda says, I'm 57. I can't do a tap of DIY. My 23-year-old daughter does all of it in our house. If she needs to do something, she looks at YouTube. God bless YouTube. She also hates International Women's Day and says that it should be a given that women are as capable as men. End of story. Thank you for getting in contact, Linda.
What about this from Pauline? I'm driving for 38 years and I've never put petrol or diesel in my car. I'm just not able to work the pumps. I've also never opened the car bonnet and I literally just drive and park my car. We obviously don't drive very far, Pauline, or else somebody else does it for you.
But it's interesting. I remember the first time I saw my mother put in petrol, because there used to always be someone working on a forecourt who would do it, so she never did it. And she was like, I'm going to do it. Like, it's about 20-something years ago now. But because Dad always did it otherwise.
Happy International Women's Day.
Hey, Mum. I got your back. How about this, Jerry, on the topic of young people being incapable. I work at a motor factory and see it every day. Young lads driving BMWs who can't open the bonnet.
Yeah.
Because you got to find the hook, but now you just have the levers inside the car, really, isn't it?
No, you still need to unhook it.
Oh, yeah, you have to unhook it.
You
there you go.
I find Colette.
The sweet spot. Men unable to find the sweet spot. I am shocked.
Some people are very good at finding the... Open any bonnet they want. Colette, I would be quite happy if my 20-year-old would learn the basic household chores of cleaning up after herself and light the stove without setting the house on fire, never mind changing the tyre. Yeah, simple things. But it was interesting in that study, they're saying that 1 in 3 of 18 to 25-year-olds are not able to do basic DIY.
See the way he's continuing talking because he doesn't want to talk about the bonnet comment, yeah? Everyone notices that?
Coming up next, Brian Lloyd, our movie man, is here to talk about the return of Ghostface in Scream and shares his Oscar predictions. Let us know who you think is going to come home with the Oscars. We're back very shortly.
I've got to find it this week.
The Oscars, they're just around the corner. Somebody's excited.
Very excited.
And everyone wants to know who is going to walk away with the big wins.
I'm going to be knackered on Monday. I'm staying up. I'm staying up, lads. We're going to go the whole way through. Here to give us...
Winning a Gossy was a big thing about Oscars, to be fair. Yeah.
Award-winning television presenter.
Nailed it,
here to give us his Oscar predictions and thoughts on the week's new cinema releases, it is, of course, Brian Lloyd from Entertainment.ie. Brian, it's lovely to have you here. Before we kick off our Oscars chat, we're going to start with Scream 6.
6.
Yeah.
6. When Courtney Cox gets to do the 7 Scream, they're going to have to put in that reference, the Chandler Friends reference. Yeah. Anyway, Scream...
OK, right, move on.
Scream 6, we'll take a look at it. I think we all know what we're going to see. Let's go.
What's it going to be about?
Guys?
Sorry, we're
so that's not a college party house.
No,
Westbrook.
What's going
it's
on?
New York and there's new rules, Tommy. That's like the tagline for the thing. Yeah. I didn't just come up with that. But
and does Dua Lipa's song play over it?
Yeah, over and over again. Lovely. Yeah, no, it doesn't.
What happens? What's it all about?
So what you saw there was Sabrina Carpenter is the name of the character. She is Billy Loomis's illegitimate daughter. Billy Loomis was in the very, very first one. He was the killer. Him and Stu Macher for fans at home. Remember all that.
Yeah, and that was Skeet Ulrich.
That was Skeet Ulrich. Yeah. There is a really long, convoluted family history with Scream that the fans of this franchise know backwards and forwards. Billy Passmore, actually, huge Scream fan. There you go, he's a producer.
Billy Passmore's a producer.
He's a producer on the show. Massive fan. I saw him at the premiere. Anyways, so what's going on is basically it's following on from the events of the last film. They've now all moved to New York, are trying to move on with their lives. But then, sure enough, the Ghostface killer reappears and starts stabbing people to death. They then have to figure out who actually is behind the mask. Why is he all of a sudden coming back to attack everybody? And figure out the mystery. This is okay. I mean, I love the very, very first one from 1999. I thought it was really so smart, so clever, so meta. 6 films later, they're still trying to come up with this whole meta thing. They're still trying to keep people...
meta?
Meta is as in it's aware of the fact that it's a slasher film.
Oh, right.
It's aware of the fact that the audience knows what's going on and is trying to second guess it, so they'll set up red hair.
So meta.
Yeah.
Yeah. In this movie, we have Courtney Cox is back.
Yeah.
So she has been in all of our screens.
Gail Weathers,
She's our mainstay. But we don't have Neve Campbell.
Yeah, she basically bowed out of this because she felt that she wasn't being paid enough. That's literally it. It's nothing to do with she didn't feel the role was right for her or anything like that. She wanted to be paid the same rate as, the stars of the franchise, which is fair enough. I mean, she was,
Is she saying that she's not getting on pay parity with someone like
Courtney Cox, I think it is.
Or is it that you're making this amount of money, hike up my...
Yeah.
They make these films make a lot of money.
These films make huge amounts of money, massive amounts of money. And she basically felt that for the work that she was doing, it wasn't commensurate with the amount of money that was made, which is fair enough. I mean, she's talked about it. She's like, women in the film industry have to fight to be paid with parity, like we're talking about International Women's Day, and she's right. It's true. It does happen. And to be fair, when you're watching this, it's not as if there's a big... gaping hole where her character should be. Do you know that kind of way?
Yeah.
It does kind of feel like they're just throwing everybody in to kind of keep... Like Hayden Panettiere, who was in, the 4th one.
Yes.
She is back in this.
Her, right?
From Heroes, She's back now for this. Now she's an FBI agent and all the rest of it, and it just feels like they're just tacking her on just because it's like...
But it doesn't, because it's going to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's Scream.
Is it any good?
It's grand. It's fine. It's totally okay. I think it's one of those films that if you were just looking for something very, very loud and messy and entertaining and kind of campy, great. That's exactly what you're getting.
Because it's interesting. Movies like this used to either release at Halloween or in the summer. I know what you did last summer, Scream. They were huge in the summer because, teenagers were heading off to the cinema all the time.
It's a weird
and
time
now
for
it's
it to come
just releasing in a March.
Yeah, it's odd. I'm not 100% sure what the thinking behind that is. But I mean, the fact of it is that I think people will just turn up for this no matter what, whether it is in Halloween or whether it is in the summer.
Coming towards the end of the Six Nations or something, probably just needing to...
Could be that too, in fairness,
How many stars would you give it?
2.5 out of 5.
Grand.
It's grand.
What did you give the last one?
3.
3, okay, grand, okay.
It's grand.
Let's move on to our second movie, My Sailor, My Love. We've got a little clip of it as well. Let's take a quick look.
If you're having a hard time managing, Dad, we could get someone in. A housekeeper. Just to warn you, my father can be a little bit tricky.
How much is she paying you?
400.
I'll give you 5. If you never darken my door again.
I'm stretched to breaking point as it is. I have my father to worry about. I have this useless bloody therapy I go to week after week.
I was just looking for Annie.
I am nobody's fool.
I just came to apologise. To ask you to come back.
We're all sitting here going, who's
Ireland
he?
looks gorgeous, doesn't it?
It does look gorgeous. James Cosmo, Brendan Gleeson's dad in Braveheart, who was in the latest series of Jack Ryan. He turns up in everything. Everything, James Cosmo there.
And he's always solid. Every time you see him, it's like, James Cosmo, he's really, really good.
He's really good, great character actor. What is it? It's set in Ireland?
Yeah, it's set in Ireland. James Cosmo is this retired sea captain who's effectively living alone. He's kind of estranged from his children, except for Catherine Walker, who's this nurse who's kind of hovering around him, trying to keep him up, trying to keep him happy and all the rest of it. But he really wants to be left alone. She feels like she's stretched at breaking point, as she said in the trailer, and then she hires Bríd Brennan to come into the house as a housekeeper and try kind of keep him company and keep the house clean and all the rest of it. Eventually then a relationship forms between James Cosmo and Bríd Brennan's character, and he kind of starts to latch on to her family, her extended family, and finds that he's getting more out of that family than he is out of his own family, which then begins to really irk Catherine Walker's character, and she's like, you know, I've been here this entire...
Been here the whole time.
Been here the whole time, and, you know, am I not enough for you and all the rest of it?
It's a story that resonates with a lot of people.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and the fact that, like, you know, finding love or finding romance later in life, I think, is something that you don't see a lot in these kind of films.
Yeah.
You know? And it is something that happens, you know, like, I mean, widowers, you know, like, they do find love, and widows find love and all the rest of it.
Is it quite sentimental?
A little bit too much, I think. Like, there's an element of it where it's just very kind of like weepy and... but then again, maybe that's just, you know, it just lends itself to that naturally, you know, that kind of... But certain parts of it felt like it was playing it over the top. And the fact that it's a Finnish director, it's Klaus Harrow was his name, there were certain aspects of it where, like, I was kind of like, that doesn't really happen here. Maybe that happens in Finland or something. I don't know. It was just certain points it was like, that's not really... where are you getting that from? It's not an Irish thing, because it's so... Like, the landscape is such a big part of it, but, yeah, it's... I don't know. It's a bit much.
Well, it won Best Film at the Irish Film Festival.
Yeah, Best Irish Film Festival. Yeah,
which
Best
is great.
Irish, which is great, yeah. And, like, don't get me wrong, that's a minor complaint, saying that they didn't get every aspect of Irish culture right. Like, I'm trying to find something wrong with it.
What did you give it? What would you give it out of
3 out of 5.
Okay.
3 out of 5.
That
okay.
is My Sailor, My Love cinemas this weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, we're moving on to Oscars predictions. We let you two go to war.
Right. I don't think we're going to be going to war over
We'll
this.
start off easy enough. Best screenplay, right? Who do you think? So, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Banshees of Inisherin, Triangle of Sadness.
Which
The
is such a
Fabelmans.
bonkers movie. People should watch it.
Which one? The Triangle of
Triangle
Sadness?
of Sadness.
Nuts.
Okay. And Tar.
Yeah. It's going to be Banshees of Inisherin is going to win for that.
So Mark
I think.
McDonagh, you think
pretty solid lock to win.
Fairly solid, yeah.
Pretty solid, yeah. Like, he won at the WGAs, he won the BAFTAs. Like, yeah, I think Martin McDonagh is going to win this. I would not be surprised if that's the only win he gets.
This is the thing.
Yeah.
So you think they give him screenplay?
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's
the
it.
film doesn't get anything else?
No.
Or
I do think Kerry Condon will win for Best Supporting Actress. I will put that money down. I would think she's going to win Best Supporting Actress.
Excellent.
Yeah, I
Which
really do.
Which would be amazing, because what is it, Ireland nominated for like 17 awards overall, like everything?
Yeah, and 25% of the acting categories have Irish nominees, like, so that's brilliant.
Which is so exciting.
Yeah,
but to think that Banshees of Inisherin, which is the front runner and all that, might only walk with a screenplay and potentially Best Supporting Actress?
Yeah, I mean, like, that generally
like
does
Colin
tend to
Farrell?
happen. No. I think, like, for Best Actor, I'm pretty certain it's going to be Brendan Fraser.
Oh God.
Yeah, but like, look,
come on. Now,
I mean,
no, it's just so predictable with the Oscars going. Oh, a man cries in a movie and he wears that, give him an Oscar.
Yeah, 100%. Either that or can he sing? Does he look kind of like a musician? Bam, Austin Butler.
That's why I think Austin Butler's going to get it.
Yeah, it's between...
Do you?
Yeah.
Because Brendan Fraser has kind of been winning everything else except the BAFTAs. I think they're going to give it to Austin Butler because, I'm sorry to say it, but obviously the family have had a tragedy. Lisa Marie, people were voting up until quite recently in the Oscars. I think Austin Butler's getting it as a result of it.
It's between the two of them.
Unfortunately.
Wow, right,
Yeah.
okay, so Colin Farrell's out of the running then, okay, well, Kate Blanchett seems like she's got that wrapped up, has she? For Best Actress?
Yes, I think so. Like, I mean, I would say 60% certain it's going to be her. The 40% I would say Michelle Yeoh and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Now, it does seem to be kind of creeping up to 50-50. If you happen to follow the odds, I think the odds have kind of shortened between the two of them. Michelle Yeoh is just about nearly on the same odds as Kate Blanchett, but yeah.
And are you not going for Barry Keoghan for Best Supporting?
No.
Oh, you're not? No. I think he's in with a shot for that.
I think
it's going to be Ke Huy Quan. Yeah, I think it's going to be
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
But you also thought that they're going to win Best Film, where
Best
it has
Picture
to be Top Gun.
Do you know something? Right now, hold on a minute there, Coach Cheese. Let me tell you, right.
You agree with me?
I think it should. I honestly think Top Gun Maverick should have won Best Picture. You're looking at me like I'm just talking out of my...
How much has the Pentagon paid for Top Gun 2?
That doesn't matter.
How much have they paid for a piece of American propaganda?
It's epic.
It's it's more than just American propaganda.
It is a propaganda.
There were jets, Maureen.
Oh my God.
There were jets. No.
And they went down behind enemy lines.
And they came up from behind them.
There was laughter. Like,
they
compared
ran away.
to like Everything Everywhere All at Once, I don't really know what it was all
It's
about.
actually very funny.
It's very funny. Yeah.
But does it have jets?
It does actually. Yes, it does actually.
Oh, okay.
It does have jets.
It has interdimensional travel. It's got sausage fingers. I mean, come on.
I just think, like, given what Top Gun was, the pressure on it to deliver again, and when do you ever see a sequel come back that's better than the first?
The pressure on Tom Cruise to make millions, which he always makes anyway.
To be
it's
fair,
a great movie. Everyone who come out of it says great movie.
Yeah, and to be fair as well, like
Not
Steven.
disagree.
No, but to be fair, Steven Spielberg, like basically rugby tackled Tom Cruise at this shindig, and he was like, "You basically saved cinema. You basically saved theatrical release."
As if a man,
because it made that much money. Like,
as if a man who thinks he's a god in his religion needs more of a prop up. I mean, come on.
But, like, if you do think about the cinema is dying. Like, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And a blockbuster like Top Gun
got everybody out.
Everybody back.
Everybody out of the house.
Showed how important cinema is. So if you think for film, like, for it to win it would be, like, listen, Tom Cruise, he's a bit of a Fruit Loop, but he's still an amazing, like, he's the last of the great Hollywood actors.
He is the best runner, bar none. When it comes to running, that's what I love to watch. There's a supercut online of like 12 minutes.
It's amazing.
They don't make them like Tom Cruise.
They don't make that. Chris Evans is trying. He does a good one. But I have to say, I do think this year that an awful lot of films, like Banshees, got people out around the world.
That's the thing. Like, what I actually love about the Oscars this year is, like, all of the nominees, they are actually really entertaining. People have seen them. Then they're actually really entertaining. That's really, really rare for Oscars. Not joking.
Best film. Everything Everywhere.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's going to win it.
Top Gun.
It's a lot.
Brian Lloyd from entertainment.ie. Look forward to seeing you at the start of the week. We're going to... Oh, it's going to be
Monday,
exciting.
Oscar show.
Still to come, we're going to be sampling wines made by top female producers.
Plus, up next, we're on the catwalk with style inspiration for your special occasions this spring. Welcome back to Ireland AM. 'Tis the season for communions and confirmations. It's March, I suppose it is, yeah. Stylist Justine King is here with occasion wear inspiration. Sneaks up, doesn't it, every year?
I know, and it's probably my #1 requested thing is what to wear to my child's confirmation, communion, christening, and then wedding guests. So we're kind of covering all those, yeah.
Because it does have to hit sort of a sweet spot. You don't want to be overdone, but you do want to look classy.
100%, and I think we all now want to get maximum wear out of what we buy. So it's something that might be available for all of those things, or we'll wear again next year.
So people are kind of going, OK, can I wear it with boots to casual it up? What can I...
Absolutely.
You get that asked all the time?
All the time. That's probably my #1, yeah.
Let's go. We're going to start with our first up today. It is Ursula.
And we have a stunning, she's a vision in this beautiful dress. This is from My Kind of Dress, who are online, mykindofdress.com, $74.95. There's a definite Zimmerman vibe.
So you know the people who left Zimmerman to set up their own LMA label? That's almost the same as one of their dresses.
Yes, but we're saving on the price tag here.
We are really saving on the price tag.
Absolutely stunning. I mean, this is your child's christening, child's communion, day 2 of a bride. I don't know, can we wear it to someone else's wedding? The white, what kind of whitey cream? But it's absolutely stunning. As you can see, the attention to detail. We've got the beautiful lace detailing going through it. We've got the intricate little buttons there. And then it does come with that rope belt as well, which kind of gives it more of a casual kind of edge. You could add wedges or whatever with this.
Oh, Zimmerman, oh my God.
It's stunning, isn't it? And then that beautiful exaggerated cuff. And then it does come with a slip that's a little bit shorter than the dress. You're showing a bit of leg as well on that. But I think you could totally dress this down, wear it with your white boots, with your wedges on holidays. We've dressed it up for our occasion wear, but yeah.
And it certainly is. You can wear it with flip-flops in summer.
Yes, absolutely.
Gorgeous, so really like that.
The shoes next, so they are from Murphy Shoes and they are €135. Beautiful gold sandal. I like that these aren't too harsh a gold. They're that kind of soft, kind of creamy gold.
Yeah.
They have that nice kind of interesting heel on them as well. And then they've got a nice soft cushioned insole as well.
Beautiful. And for the jewellery today...
Yes, so we'll start with the earrings and they are from Garrett Mallon Design House. So a wonderful Irish designer. These are from his Redanta collections. That's the Irish for radiant. And as you can see, it's kind of like a little sunburst on these drop earrings. And they have the chain detailing as well. And they are sterling silver. So then she has a beautiful ring too from Garrett Mallon Design House. And this ring is a bespoke ring. So this has sterling silver, 9-carat gold, and then a gorgeous African garnet. So he makes these to order. So you could order this with an amethyst, a blue topaz, a rhodolite.
You're not getting this for 30 quid.
No, this one's €430.
Yeah, that's
but
what I thought.
That's your piece you're getting for a special occasion.
Very
you're having
special.
that for
My
years.
child is getting a communion. Let me raid their jar and get myself a ring.
And hand it down to the child
there we
someday.
go.
There's your excuse.
Beautiful, really Zimmerman. Fair play. That's
stunning evening look.
Marwa's here.
Yeah, so Marwa's up next. And again, this look is from mykindofdress.com. So we'll start off with her jacket here. And this is the leatherette biker jacket. This one is $39.95 from My Kind of Dress. They have this in a cream and a baby pink. And I do think in Ireland we need to think about the whole look. We need to think what we're putting over our shoulders in the church or on a cooler day. So of course, picking up on any of the colours in this beautiful dress. So the dress is also from My Kind of Dress, and that's $49.95. So it's a nice price point on that too. You can see the beautiful butterfly sleeve, the plunging neckline, and then it does have a gorgeous cutout at the back as well. If we'll see the back there. Yeah, absolutely stunning at the back too.
And I think people shouldn't be afraid of wearing bras with the line across. Do a Carrie Bradshaw on it.
Absolutely.
Clash, get a pink bra, get a blue bra.
I was just going to say pick up on one of the colours in the dress, and you can really go for that if you wanted to. But of course, you could wear the stick-on cups with that one too. But it's nice that it has that kind of butterfly sleeves. You don't have to wear a cover-up with this one, and it's going to be really flattering on the arm as well. I've picked up on the pink throughout the look. So these are from Murphy Shoes, and they're €75. They have the nice Cuban block heel, so they're a good one for all-day wear. And they have them in royal blue, which would also go with this dress with the blue going through it. And they have them in black as well in Murphy Shoes.
Really lovely. And the jewellery?
Yeah, so her earrings then from Garrett Mallon Design House. They're €75, and they are the Clucking, I hope I'm saying that right, Torque drop earrings. So they're inspired by where his studio is up in Carlingford, and he looks out on pebble beaches, and you can see the little pebbled effect going through those earrings.
Okay.
And then they've got the necklace that goes with it too. So that is the Torque pendant. Now this is on a beautiful ball chain. You can see the little detail even on the chain. And that's a 16-inch, but this comes in a longer 18-inch or a 20-inch if you preferred a longer pendant with that.
Love the old 20-inch length. Yeah, that's
I know,
beautiful.
the longer one with certain looks, but yeah, the 16-inch is perfect with that. And that is, of course, sterling silver and handmade in his studio.
Gorgeous, Marwa. Thank you so much for that. Sophie is with our third look today.
Yes, Sophie is looking gorgeous in red in this look. And this one is from Bourne Clothing. So Bourne Clothing are online at bourneclothing.ie, and they have 20 stores nationwide. So this is from their Emily and Me collection, and it's exclusive to Bourne. They do beautiful occasion wear in this collection, and what I love is it's totally size inclusive. They do from a size 8 up to a size 20 in all of these pieces. This is fully lined as well, so it's really beautifully cut, and it has pockets, which Irish
And it's
women.
got that weight, the heaviness that you love.
And as you can see, that shape is just so gorgeous on a bigger bust or a smaller bust. It's got the little bit of a capped sleeve, and then it draws her in on the waist. You could casual this up a little bit by adding your own belt and wearing it with a pair of boots, but of course we've dressed it up for our occasion.
But it is the issue, like regardless of your size, with that sort of a cut there that they have going on and that line there, it's going to be good.
Yes,
for all
it's a
sizes.
very flattering shape for an 8 up to a size 20. The shoes then from Murphy Shoes, they're €165. We're seeing these kind of pointed slingbacks being a major trend. They were on the catwalks at Prada, at Bottega Veneta. They're a comfortable shoe and they keep you nice and secure, but they also have that gorgeous sweetheart toe line at the front too, which is really flattering on the foot, and they're going to go with it.
I railed against white shoes for years and I love them now. They're so gorgeous. The jewellery here?
Yeah, so we've got the earrings here from Garrett Mallon Design House, and these are €165. They're the 9-carat gold stud earrings, again from that Redanta collection, so they've got that kind of a sunburst effect, and they're your everyday gold studs.
Yeah.
So then this beautiful piece, this is, again, Garrett Mallon Design House, €195. This is, especially for Mother's Day, this is a gorgeous gifting piece. It's from his clan collection, and you can see that illustrates a little clan.
The little family.
So it's got 9-carat gold in the clan, and you can get any family. So if it's a single parent with 2 kids, if it's 2 adults and 3 kids, you can get it made specifically for your family. So a beautiful Mother's Day gift piece for sure.
Very sweet. Sophie, thank you so much for that. Beautiful. We're going on to our final look of the day. Ursula is back. What have you done with this one?
Yeah, so we've Ursula again in another pop of colour here in this beautiful look, also from Bourne Clothing. So as I said, it will be available in stores nationwide from next week. We're seeing a bit of a preview here, and you can pre-order it online now on their website. So again, it's from the Emily and Me collection, so it's beautifully made, fully lined, has our pockets, and then it has a little hidden elasticated waist at the back, so it's got a little bit more give in the waist as well. And again, an 8 to a 20 that's going to be available in. It's got the little cutout detail as well on the back there, and then that butterfly sleeve that I'm loving today.
I love the colour. How much is that?
That one is $59.99 from Bourne.
Great, because you can pick up on so many of the colours. You've gone with the purple.
You could go blue, or you could go for that kind of darker navy, but I've picked up on that fuchsia colour in the shoes, and they're from Murphy Shoes. They're €199. And as you can see, they've got that beautiful embellishment across the front.
Very
and
cool,
then
yeah.
they have a gorgeous gel insole, so they are a very comfortable shoe. All of our shoes today are going to be comfortable for your all-day wear with your heels.
Ursula doing the foot modelling out of her feet today. That was, oh,
So the earrings then from Garrett Mallon Design House, they're €145 and they are from his pendulum collections. They look like the pendulum on a clock. They're sterling silver and then they have the blue topaz stone in them too. And then the ring from that same collection, you can see the beautiful topaz stone. That one's €230. Sterling silver and 9-carat gold, but that can be made, custom made with different stones if you wanted it with a rhinestone or an amethyst.
Absolutely gorgeous. There you go now. I hope you fulfilled the brief for some people. You're getting asked those questions all the time. Stylist Justine King, thank you so much for that. Tammy's, have you lashed something into you already? We just did occasion wear.
We sure did. And Michelle Lawlor, who I'm here with from Nude Wines. You were loving the fashion there, weren't you?
I was loving that last dress.
Beautiful.
I'm going straight. There's a bourne near me. I'm going straight down. I'm not joking.
No, we're here to talk about wine.
We are.
We're talking about wine, yes. Coming up next, we're going to talk what better way to celebrate International Women's Day than with a selection of tipples from female winemakers. That's coming up after the break. What better way to toast the ladies this International Women's Day than with some delicious wines produced by female winemakers?
Yeah, we did it. We were kind of slagging the whole champagne brunches, but this is, on a day like this, supporting female-run businesses, entrepreneur and founder of the Nude Wine Company.
In a very male-dominated industry, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Michelle Lawlor.
Pale, they call it.
Is that the wine now, or is that the makers?
No, definitely. What are the industry?
What are we starting with first?
So we've got 2 award-winning reds. So we have a Malbec on your far left, if you want to have a little try of it.
Okie dokie.
This one won, so it's a female winemaker, and this one won Best Red from the Americas at the National Off-Licence Awards.
Oh, right.
And an Argentinian Malbec is a winner always.
So
isn't
easy,
it?
yeah. And what I was going to say about the wines, you'll try them. People often say, what's the difference with a male and a female winemaker? Can you taste the difference? And you can, actually.
Right.
They tend to be a little bit more elegant, a little bit softer, a little bit more velvety.
Right.
And there's one very famous winemaker in Burgundy near where Roisin Curley is, and he said he hired a female winemaker to make his Macon, so the white Chardonnays from Southern Burgundy, and he said he could see the difference immediately when he hired his female winemaker.
That's so interesting.
It's interesting, isn't it?
The taste buds, I suppose, different chemicals in our bodies.
But different approach, because you know the way I say, the male flavours tend to be really robust, and there's just a little bit more subtlety. Have a try of it. It's absolutely gorgeous.
The female master taster in Bushmills she was a female as well, and she was like epic, blew it out of the water, so I moved on to another distillery as well. So that kind of that care, I suppose. I think
it's just a more delicate touch.
Ooh,
I know it sounds sexist, but it's not. It's just an approach.
Just a different way of doing things.
Yes,
nothing wrong with that.
Very good. So that's won awards. This our Argentinian Malbec, always a winner.
Yeah,
next
gorgeous.
Up.
The next up we have is from Southern Italy, from Salice Salentino. So this
stuff is amazing.
It's so good.
Like amazing.
So good. So this one won Best Red Wine in Ireland, blind taste at the National Off-Licence Awards in 2021.
Okay.
And really rich, chocolatey, more full-bodied.
I'm more in favour of the Malbec, I have to say.
Do you know what? It's the time of morning because this is really big and rich. It's gorgeous.
Would you need food with this? Kind of like
I'd say you just need an
extra
extra 6 hours in the day.
Okay.
It's just a bit early.
A little bit early. There looks food there.
But it won the best
red blind tasted, which is really important that it was blind tasted. It wasn't, we know who it is, we'll give them an award. It was in a blind tasting by wine professionals. This one, Best Red.
It's a husband and wife team, is it?
Husband and wife team. This is Elena. This is a lady, so she works as part of a huge team, but the lady who owns the winery is female.
Is female as well?
Yeah, so a female entrepreneur. Yeah.
And she has all this. I have to say, Southern Italy, people, if you like your wines, you got to get on.
Gorgeous.
It's just
These I have on the website. They're both under €16. I have a female wine pack for today at a special price.
Oh,
yeah.
They're real businesses.
Yeah.
We want to get onto this because you have
interesting.
actually one of these open, and it's like you probably shouldn't do this because an awful lot of people collect Roisin Curley
So
wines.
I've never even tried this until this morning because they're so rare. They're like hen's teeth.
Right. So, who is Roisin Curley?
So Roisin Curley is a pharmacist from Ballyhonus who had a love for wine, did her wine exams, worked in really famous wineries in France, now flies to Burgundy and makes part-time while she's also a pharmacist. I think it's called Total Care. If anyone's out in Ballyhonus.
What?
Yeah, she's amazing. She's also a master of wine. She is really focused.
What does
amazing.
Master of Wine mean? Because we
it's
all know
a 4-year programme. It's nearly impossible to complete. There are 417 in the whole world, and it's been going maybe 35 years.
Right, let's taste it.
Yeah. So what I would say about this one, it says on this particular bottle, 900 bottles made only.
900?
This is bottle 672.
Oh, very tasty.
They don't.
Very
it's not
easy.
even that we get all 900 here.
Oh.
These are actually showcased in the best restaurant in the world in Copenhagen called Geranium.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, isn't that fancy? Yeah, she's unbelievable. She's got such a, and she's self-funded. So she, out of her own pocket, this is 2019. So she bought the grapes in 2019, bought the oak, did all the work. They get released in October. Every year they're sold out by Christmas. The only reason why I have any is that I forgot to put them on the website.
Well, you won't have those ones. We're taking them all over this. But they are, they're now nearly collector's items.
Because I knew that people would be really interested as gifts for them. And then obviously these ones, and these are drinking wines, these are thinking wines.
Okay. What are Plus chats with best-selling crime writer Jane Casey. It's going to be a fun old day. We'll see you tomorrow from 7.
Bye.
Cheers.